Nigel, you are live on YouTube and ready to begin.
Okay, thank you very much indeed. Well, good morning, everyone, and welcome to the November meeting of Overview and Scrutiny Committee. Before opening the meeting, I would just like to remind everybody of the remote meeting protocols and the fact that we are live streaming on YouTube. So if you are not speaking, would you ensure your microphones are on mute, and if you do need to leave your station, so to speak, for any reason, then turn your video off before doing so, and I will call you to speak at appropriate times, and I will rely on Matt and Emma to recognise when any of you wish to speak. You can use the blue hand, or you can use your actual hand to indicate that, and they will remind me accordingly. So it's Remembrance Day today, and if we are still in session at 11 o'clock, we will observe the 2-minute silence, and I will ask Matt or Emma to give me a cue at 1 minute to go, so that we can suspend the meeting accordingly. So without more ado, I'd like to formally open the meeting and to receive apologies for absence. Who are we missing today, Matt?
We just have apologies from Councillor Adam Varley.
Okay. And substitutes?
We have Councillor Saul Penfold substituting for Councillor Adam Varley.
Thank you. Moving to item 3, public questions and statements. I'm not aware that we have any.
No, I've not received any.
Thank you. Moving to the minutes, item 4, we can approve the minutes of the meeting held on the 14th of October, please. So if we take them page by page for accuracy, page 1, page 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, and 9. Is everybody content that they are a fair and accurate reflection of that meeting? Okay. Matt, would you like a formal vote on that? A show of hands?
I see a show of hands, please, that everyone's happy to approve those.
Show of hands then for committee members.
Yes, that looks to be unanimous.
Thank you. Turning to item 5, items of urgent business. I'm not aware of any. Have we any, Matt?
None received.
Thank you. Item 6, declarations of interest. Does anybody have any declarations of interest in relation to the business that we'll be transacting today? I see no hands. Are we clear on that, Matt?
See any hands raised?
Thank you. Turning to item 7, petitions from the members of the public. I'm not aware of any.
None received.
Thank you. Item 8, consideration of any matter referred to the committee by a member. Again, I'm not aware of any. Are you?
Similarly, none received.
Thank you. Responses, number 8, number 9, responses of the council or cabinet to committee reports or recommendations. Are there any that you wish to draw to our attention, Matt?
I don't think there's any formal recommendations that were responded to. Obviously, I wasn't. I was on annual leave for the cabinet meeting, so please, if I missed anything, I apologise. One thing I would mention is I think we do now have a planned time for the income generation and savings members briefing. which if I just check my calendar, I believe is planned to take place on the afternoon of Wednesday, the 25th. And then also I have sent out invites already to the Digital by Design briefing. Both of those were arranged at the request of the committee. So it looks like we are going to get those both by the end of the month.
Yes, I think those have been sent out. I've certainly seen them. So thank you for that. Turning to item 10 then.
Mr. Chairman, good morning.
Good morning.
Right. Okay. I will just introduce this report. Lucy Hume is also with me today to assist members in any questions that you may have. This is the budget monitoring report from April to September of this year. The budget against which it was set was done in February of this year, which of course was before lockdown and COVID. So it sets out the position as at the end of September. And at that time, there was an underspend. By September, that, as you will be aware, Mr. Chairman, is not unusual at this time of year. But more importantly, in terms of projections by the end of the year, it was talking about a deficit of £400,000. Like a lot of things, it's changed very quickly at the moment. Two things really, I think, have taken place since. The first thing is in the fourth tranche of government support, the council received a further sum of just over £400,000. This was based on the setting up of tier authorities, or authorities in tier areas. So on that basis, theoretically, the books are now balanced for this year. For me, that is welcome news. But of course, life at the moment is full of uncertainties. So some of this projection is based on what we expect to happen when we've put in bids. We put in the first one to the government for recovering losses of income, fees and charges. The council will get back, in rough terms, £7 for every £10 that has been lost. The second thing is that we now have another lockdown for 4 weeks. I would like to think that come by December the 2nd, that is the last complete lockdown, certainly for North Norfolk, but who knows? What the impact of that will be on the council's income is a matter of speculation. And clearly we can recover some of it, but not all of it. So that, in my view, is where we are at the moment. I would like to think and would hope that by the time we get to the 31st of March, we will have balanced our income against expenditure. There will not be a deficit, and therefore we won't have to go into reserves or anywhere else in order to balance the books. Mr. Chairman, that is the introduction.
Okay, thank you very much for that. Does Officer Hume wish to follow any other information? Add anything to that?
No, thank you, Chair. I think that was a really good summary of the report, but happy to assist with any further questions.
Thank you. Okay, thank you for that. I will then open this for questions. Questions from members. Do we have any hands up?
I believe Harry would like to speak.
Yes, Councillor Blaithwaite, go ahead.
Good morning, everybody. Just to ask, do we know how this compares with other district councils in the area? Is our benchmarking good compared to, say, I don't know, Broadland or South Norfolk?
Yeah, happy to take that one. So yeah, I think we compare pretty favourably with our other Norfolk counterparts. I think they've had significant issues to deal with regarding COVID and sort of localised outbreaks within their areas that we haven't had. I think, with our population being slightly more spread out and the lack of large factories has helped us in that respect. So yeah, I think we're doing really favourably. We do continue to benchmark with them on a monthly basis by just communication with the other chief finance officers and looking at their budget monitoring reports, etc. And we're also part of a national benchmarking scheme as well, which looks at the losses of income and extra expenditure, the impact on council tax and business rates as well, the impact that COVID's had on those. And we're comparing really favourably with the national position as well. So I think we should be pleased with that.
Okay, thank you for that.
Can I just say, I think congratulations then should be handed out liberally to the officers and to the councillors concerned.
Thank you. Yes, I think we recognise the challenges that we have faced collectively, and I think to be at this kind of stage at this point in the year is of some considerable comfort, and undoubtedly you have, as an officer team, have managed the situation so that we can enjoy that degree of comfort as members. So thank you for that. Could I just ask a question? Well, could I just, yes, I guess it is a question. I'm mindful that this period of lockdown occurs during what we would recognise as the quiet part of the season, or certainly heading very much away from the shoulder part of the year. And I wonder if we've got a better idea of the likely impact as far as loss of income is concerned, particularly with regard to car parks, for example. We may be a little better placed. I wonder if that's something that you would recognise, or whether there are other differences between this lockdown and the earlier one that might either count in our favour or indeed count against us. Any comment on that from either the cabinet member or the officer, please?
I think Lucy might probably be able to provide Chairman, you with a bit more detail than I am. I pick up anecdotally some conflicting patterns that are going on. The only thing I will say, having been in one or two towns since this lockdown started, as you may have been yourself, that I do see a lower number of people about. That's not surprising, and I presume from that will have some impact on our car park income. But I'll let Lucy answer the question in more detail for you.
Thank you. Lucy.
I would definitely second everything Eric has just said. I think with the first lockdown, obviously being a little bit more stringent, we did see a huge loss in car park income. I think we felt that that would recover our position slightly having a later season. We had still quite good weather at the back end of the year, more people staying local to take their holidays and days out, etc. But I would expect to see car park income dropping off again for this month. I think we'll have to wait till probably the end of next week to see what the income streams look like, just due to timings of when we see the cash coming through. But I would be very surprised if there wasn't a significant drop off, given that the car parks remain open. People are allowed to go outside, but there are still restrictions around what people are allowed to go out and do. Obviously, lots of people would be drawn to the beach, having food, etc., and perhaps meals out, drinks out, and obviously that sort of activity has been restricted. So it may well be there's fewer people going out for that reason. So I would expect to see a drop off in income. I mean, there are other income streams such as trade waste and things like that, which I would also expect to drop off again, perhaps planning income. So I don't think it will just be isolated in terms of car parks. It is obviously unfortunate because we were starting to see some recovery around those income streams, but I think we'll have to wait till the end of the month to see the impact on that. But my hope is that it will be an isolated impact, and then once we return to the tier system in December, hopefully we start to see a recovery of those income streams again. But I would expect to provide a further update to members once we're in that position and we know what the post-lockdown world looks like.
Okay, thank you for that, Lucy. I've got two questions, or two councillors with questions on the screen. Councillor Mancini-Boyle and then Councillor Pearce.
Heinrich.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Just on the car parking thing, I seem to remember we had a bit of a surplus on it because the weather was so good during our summer. And if either Councillor Seward or Councillor Hugh would, do we still get the, I believe it was 70 pence in the pound as compensation for any losses we had in car parking. Do we still have that, or is that now all finished?
I can easily try and answer that. The bids for the loss of income fees and charges, which includes car parks, goes right through to March next year. We've made a bid under the first tranche, Gerald, and we will be making bids under the next two tranches. And if we're losing car parking income, then that will be part of the bid. What happened between July and September was that car parking income, particularly in July and to a certain extent in September, was above the forecast budget level, and that's where the surplus was. But of course, that didn't compensate for practically zero car parking income in the first 3 months of the year, which forms part of the first tranche of our bid. So that is where we are, but I can assure you that the government scheme continues right through to March.
Okay, thank you for that, Councillor Seward. Are you content with that, Councillor Mancini-Boyle?
Sort of. Surely when this transfer, the help from central government, that was backdated to when the COVID first started in March. So we would have probably been covered. My question is did these extra money we got in for that month in the summer, did that compensate for the extra, say 30% and 30 pence in the pound? So at what stage are we? Are we sort of flatlined, or are we behind, or are we slightly in front? Could somebody answer that for me, please?
Yeah. Mr. Blatch, would you like to respond to that? I see your hand is raised.
Thank you. Good morning, everybody. I believe there's 3 payment opportunities that we have to make claims for, Councillor Mancini-Boyle. So there was the initial period where there was total lockdown, those 10 weeks at the beginning of the year, and we've made a first claim. I think Lucy may be able to tell you of the date windows, but we have to account for losses over the year. So the more positive period where income was above projections in July, August and September will be taken and balanced across the year. So it will, if there is a positive balance at that stage, that will be set against the projected income in those earlier months, and the MHCLG will fund the difference on the proportional ratio that you've described, but over a 12-month period, and we have 3 staged payments to make or claims to submit during that process through until the end of this financial year in March.
Thank you for that, Steve.
Thank you for that, Mr. Blatch.
Thank you. Councillor Pearce.
Yes, good morning, everyone. I think, Gerard, you've probably asked some of the questions that I was going to ask. There goes the front door. I'll have to hold on. I'll have to wait. I was going to ask, the fact that the central government has taken to extend the furlough arrangements to March, does that mean even if we get to a situation where we can have a tiered response and maybe become free or freer, does that mean our present arrangements will continue until that time when the next review or the end of furlough occurs?
Who'd like to respond to that?
I'm happy to respond to that if that would be helpful. So we're working with county partners around the position that the county will be in on the 2nd of December, when we expect restrictions to lift, and there will be a reversion back to the tier 1, tier 2 or tier 3 arrangements, depending upon a number of criteria, including the level of infection per 100,000, and also pressure in the local NHS acute hospital capacity within given areas. So we're in regular dialogue with county partners, Director of Public Health, around how and planning for when Norfolk comes out of lockdown on the 2nd of December. The issues around furlough do not directly impact on the authority. That's a mechanism that is into the wider economy. We, as Lucy Hume has outlined, we will monitor car parking income to see the extent that recovers in December after the 2nd of December. And thereafter we'll monitor and claim any deficit through the MHCLG income loss scheme through until the end of the financial year. So the team are regularly reviewing our income across a number of streams to see where that is below, at or above projections, and that will be factored into the claims that the further claims that we make to the MHCLG.
Thank you for that, Steve. Are you content with that, Nigel?
Yeah, so thank you very much for that, Steve. As I say, the question really was obviously asking for clarification. It wasn't an attempt to catch anybody out or to put pressure on. At the end of the day, I'm fully aware that, as everybody else is, that North Norfolk District Council was under extreme pressure, and the government have given this money from central funds that to go to where it's hopefully needed. So thank you for that explanation, Steve. Very much appreciated.
Okay, thank you.
So obviously sorry, Nigel. Obviously, the nature of our economy is such that tourism spend would be less during the winter, but it's legitimate for us to say that a number of hotels, a number of attractions would have seen large numbers of visitors. Thursford, for example, but there are others who offer, North Norfolk Railway, Holcombe Estate, who offer a Christmas experience. They will be curtailed, and it's that impact on the hospitality sector, particularly, that I believe the National Furlough Scheme is intended to support. So there will be less footfall in our towns as a result of fewer visitors that would come to those attractions in the next 6 to 8 weeks, and that will have an impact on our local economy as well as the income streams of the authority, and it's that we need to manage.
That was going to be the second part of my question. You beat me to it, Steve. So, but it is something that we need all to take note of, because of, yes, we'd like to come out, as we all know, on the 2nd of December and come out to a tiered system. But obviously, let's hope we don't go back into a full lockdown. But we are definitely going to suffer more because of the reliance on tourism to our whole local economy. So the question, I thought was very legitimate, bearing in mind, that you do have the furlough scheme, you do have the grants and everything else, and it is going to cost an awful lot of money. And the fact that we'll get 70 pence in the pound back for their loss of income has got to be good. And all I'm going to say is thank you for that explanation, Steve.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Heinrich.
Thank you, Chairman. It's just a query on the ICT support services issues around the sudden disappearance of Microsoft's government framework for software licenses. Just wonder whether that could have been foreseen, and if we have any knowledge of why that particular framework has suddenly been withdrawn. Is this Microsoft seeking to increase profits, or is there something that's been in the pipeline for some time that we could have dealt with earlier? Thank you.
Who'd like to respond to that? Go ahead, Mr. Blatch.
I'm happy to answer that and say that the head of business transformation and IT has produced a briefing paper for the senior leadership team on that issue this week, and it will be shared with Cabinet in the immediate future, and that any additional costs that arise to the authority moving forward from those changes in the licensing, Councillor Heinrich, will need to be incorporated within the budget papers for 21-22 in the next few weeks. So that matter is under active consideration and appraisal at this present time.
Thank you. Very good explanation there. I'm more than happy.
Thank you. Is that paper going to be shared with members more widely, Mr. Blatch? You're on mute at the moment.
I apologise, sorry. In due course it will be. As I say, the paper was presented to SLT yesterday and will now move forward in terms of those budget discussions with the Cabinet, and as the budget for Cabinet, as the budget papers come forward in the next 6 to 12 weeks, that will be a consideration that is presented to you for discussion and I would imagine approval. I think we're going to have to make provision. Without that support, we would be exposed in terms of our systems, but the head of IT and business transformation will be able to share that information with you in the coming weeks.
Okay, thank you for that. Any further questions? I see no hands.
No.
No, okay. Well, we are asked to note the contents of the report and recommend to full council the release of the 247 and 83 capital receipts to increase the Coastal Adaptation Fund and reinvesting proceeds previously received from the sale of land. Do you require a proposer and a seconder and a
Yes,
formal vote?
as we're recommending to full council that we'll go through a formal vote. So I'll do a roll call once you hear your proposer in a second.
Thank you. Do I have a proposer for? I've got Councillor Blaithwaite and a seconder, Councillor Fredericks. I can see on my screen.
Okay, so I'll call out your names now. So Councillor Dixon.
For.
Councillor Withington.
For.
Councillor Blathwaite.
For.
Councillor Fredericks.
For.
Councillor Heinrich.
For.
Councillor Housden.
For.
Councillor Mancini Boyle.
Excuse the cuckoo clock, but for.
Councillor Spagnola.
For.
And Councillor Penfold.
I can't beat a cuckoo clock, but for.
Okay, so that's unanimous.
Okay, thank you for that. Then moving on to item 11, which is the Treasury half-yearly report for 2021. That's at pages 53 and 60 through to 64. Councillor Seaward, would you wish to speak on this?
Thank you, Chairman. This is a normal report that comes around at this time of year. It's quite a technical report. There's two recommendations. One is about approving it. The other one is approving changes to the counterparty limits. The only observation I'll make at this stage is, of course, the council has been holding more money than it normally would have done in relation because of the government grants that we've been receiving, a lot of which has gone out, but we've still got a bit more to do. But it's quite a technical report, and I'm sure Lucy Hume can add a few comments and assist members in any questions.
Okay, thank you. Officer Hume.
Yeah, I think as a team, we're quite pleased with how our Treasury investments have fared the half year, especially considering the huge hit we took, particularly to our pool funds with the announcement of the lockdown in March. We've obviously had a lot of money invested when the government gave us £65 million to distribute to businesses within the area. And obviously that had to be invested and kept nice and safe to make sure it was there to distribute. It took an awful lot of effort on behalf of the team to make sure that was achievable. So I'd just like to extend my thanks to them. I think we've done really well in terms of our rate of return that we've managed to achieve, especially in a really low interest rate environment. And we do keep all our investments under active review. So it's been a tough half year, but I think we've done a really good job. So I don't have anything else to add, but happy to take questions.
Okay, thank you. Questions then for Officer Hume or Councillor Seaward? Any questions? I see no hands at the moment.
Councillor Housden would like to ask a question.
Go ahead, Councillor Housden.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. There's been increasing dialogue in the press most of this year about negative interest rates. and clearly at 0.1%, we're getting very close to that. What's the likely effect if negative interest rates are imposed?
Who'd like to respond to that?
I'm happy to respond to that one. So I think at the moment we are taking the risk of negative interest rates as quite a low one. I think the Bank of England have seen other countries that have brought that in, and it's not quite worked in the way that they anticipated it was going to. So we do see that as quite a low risk. But obviously that would seriously impact our liquid funds. So we have a large amount of money that's kind of locked away medium to long term, but we do have still significant liquid funds, particularly at the moment with all the grants that keep sort of flying in and out. So it would impact those. We'd potentially look to diversify in terms of what type of instruments we hold things in. I think the backstop is always to put it with the UK central government. They have a debt management facility that we can deposit short-term funds there. That's the safest option. Unfortunately, at the moment, they are charging us to do that on a short-term basis, and I suspect if there's negative interest rates, they will charge us further. A lot of the short-term funds that we have money in charge us kind of management fees. At the moment, those management fees have been waived just to keep the interest that we get basically at nil. So obviously that would present a significant challenge for the fund managers in terms of then wanting to charge us because they want us to keep their money there. So I think in terms of cost, it would be fairly low. I think the issue would be around accessing those funds. So we would have to potentially look at holding further funds with the UK government, which would cost us more money. As I said, I don't think it's a particularly likely scenario, but it is something that we're keeping an eye on. And we do talk to our Treasury advisors, Arlen Close, on a really regular basis about this. And they will provide further advice to us as and when it should happen.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. I mean, taking what you said, it does appear that we might slightly be on the cusp of this. In that case, is there any sense in an element of pre-planning that perhaps Overview and Scrutiny might look at just as a worst case scenario?
It's certainly an option. I think the worst case scenario remains to me to fall back on the UK government debt management facility. It's the safest place to have the cash, but as I said, unfortunately does make a small charge at the moment. But chiefly, we have to be concerned about the security of the cash that we hold, and then liquidity, and then the yield at the end. So my first concern will be keeping that money safe, and the safest place for it is with the UK government, even if that means we have to pay for the privilege of it. I don't see it as a significant budgetary concern on the basis that so far this year, I think it's cost us about £15, which isn't a significant amount of money. Obviously, if we have negative interest rates, that might get a little bit worse, but I can probably find another £15 should I have to. So I don't see it as a significant concern, but if it's something that the committee wish to look into, then I'm sure we could support with that.
Okay, thank you. Can I just recap? So the three main criteria are security, liquidity, and what was the third one?
Yield is the third one.
Yeah, okay, that's fine. Okay, that's fine, Mr. Chairman. Thank you very much for that.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Mancini-Boyle.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Sorry to go a bit international here, but with the American election being almost decided, the dollar rate has gone from dollar rate against the pound has gone from 124 right up to currently 132. Does that not give us any extra income on any of our monies that we have kicking about the place?
So not in the immediate term. So we do hold several funds which have global equities. Some of those are held within the US. So we could see some extra income flowing in. I think what we're more likely to see is the capital value of those investments changing. I don't see it being a massive moneymaker for us. I mean, obviously, it's good that if that process is not a protracted one, so whatever President Trump decides to do next will impact on the value of those funds potentially significantly. It has done in the past. His Twitter feed has had more of an impact on our investment portfolio than perhaps you might ever imagine. So hopefully, if that process is dealt with quickly, then at least we won't see those huge fluctuations. And hopefully, it will have a positive value overall on those investments. But at this stage, it's too early to say, really.
Okay, yeah, I think we recognise there are some quite complex dynamics around international and currency markets. I think suffice to say that I'm sure you have got a far greater awareness of that than we as members would have. So are you satisfied with that reply, Councillor Mancini-Boyle?
I'm satisfied with that reply. May I ask one more question, please? I'm sorry if I sound awkward, but I seem to remember a while ago I asked about ethnic investments. Do we still have ethnic investments that are ethical? Or, because I believe we were moving away from some. And sorry if that sounds like a very awkward question, but it's something that I'd like to have answered, please.
Yeah, no, it's not an awkward question at all. So at the moment, we are looking into the ethical portfolios of all of our investment counterparties. So that's something that our treasury management advisors are in closer helping with. So most investment counterparties now have specific staff members who look into the ethical side of their investments and the governance arrangements, etc. So we are looking to come up with a proposal to say, any new counterparties that we invest with must meet a certain criteria. We're not proposing at the moment to kind of de-invest in anything that we already have, on the basis that those investments which are long-term have been particularly hit in terms of capital value due to COVID. And obviously, at the moment, were we to disinvest from those, we would lose some of the capital value, which we're obviously not willing to do, because there's considerations of that's taxpayers' money. So I think we're trying to take a long-term view on this, but certainly new counterparties that we have, and we'll be looking very closely at their kind of values and what they produce in terms of ethical output. But it's something that's very under the spotlight at the moment, generally in the sector. So luckily, there is a growing amount of information out there for us to help us to do that.
Are you content with that reply?
Yes, thank you for that, Councillor Shiers. I'm sorry for putting you on the spot.
No, that was Officer Hume. Thank you for that. Right. Okay. Any other questions?
Yeah, we have Councillor Blathwaite, Councillor Heinrich, and Councillor Withington.
Okay. In that order, then, Councillor Blathwaite.
Yeah, I'd just like to ask, with the faint toot of a vaccine over the horizon, surely that must send the fear of negative interest rates on retreat. Would I be right in that?
I would hope so. I think what is also useful is that previously, when we've had tightening of restrictions announced, so the very, very initial lockdown, the second lockdown, and then during the summer when we had kind of mutterings of a potential second wave of COVID, we have seen quite large hits to the capital value of our investments. I think news of a vaccine will certainly reverse that to a certain extent, because should it be successful and should the majority of the population become vaccinated, there's obviously a chance then that we won't have to have this kind of lockdown situation. That obviously will help out local businesses, it will help the economy, it will help people's just kind of their general feeling about they want to go out and spend money, consumer confidence, if you like. So I think the capital value of the investments will certainly start to recover, and then perhaps kind of go back to their overall position of having risen slightly from when we bought them. So that's kind of where I see the big gain coming from a vaccine. But yeah, sure, I think the interest rates are taking a cut due to everything that's happening with COVID. So if we can kind of reverse ourselves out of that situation a little bit, then I would expect that to reduce the risk of things like negative interest rates. So yes, so hopefully this, in the coming months, we'll become aware how effective that vaccine is, and then hopefully we will start to see that sort of coming through.
Okay, you content with that?
more than content. Thank you very much, Lucy.
Thank you. Councillor Heinrich.
Thank you, Chairman. Just a couple of short questions. Firstly, my understanding is we have very low exposure to commercial property market. Could you confirm that? And secondly, does your crystal ball indicate potential impact of there being no trade deal with the European Union? Thank you.
Okay, so with regards to property, I'll take that one first. So our exposure to direct exposure to commercial property is very low. We have indirect commercial property exposure through our pooled funds. So we have one fund which trades in property and a couple of multi-asset funds which have some property exposure in there. But because that's managed externally and it's a much more kind of national scale, we aren't subject to local issues in the same way that we would be if we directly invested in property ourselves. The income streams we're seeing from commercial property indirectly have held up really well, actually. The capital values have taken a little bit of a tumble, as have all of the capital values across the asset class, but the income is holding up really well. Our investment counterparties have been really proactive at collecting the rents that are due to them, and that's how we get our income from those funds. I think they've collected something like 95% of the rents, which I think in this situation where they're renting out to businesses, that's quite an impressive figure. So that's certainly helped us, and I think that they do their due diligence on their tenants. So I think they do that in a better way than we could currently with our resources. So that's why we use those type of investments. In terms of my crystal ball, well, I wish I did have one. I think, you know, it's interesting, isn't it? I mean, I personally didn't think 2020 was going to be a year where there was something in the headlines that was bigger than Brexit, and yet here we are. I think that is the one thing that we need to be still mindful of. It's rolling on in the background, and that COVID isn't the only thing that's going to be impacting us. And that, you know, if we have this vaccine and we all come out the other side of COVID, then great. And unfortunately, Brexit is still sat there, you know, waiting for us. I think at this current time, there's a lot of, we need to be a little bit careful about what's going on in the media because it's a little bit sensationalized. So I think we'll just need to wait for the next few weeks and see what happens. But certainly the impact of a no deal Brexit is not a positive one. So I think it's something that we need to be mindful of, but it's not something that obviously we can directly affect ourselves. And in terms of an impact, I'm not sure I would like to try to quantify what that would be, but it would not be a positive one. I can certainly assure you of that. Okay,
thank you for that. Are you content with that?
Most content, thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Withington.
Good morning. Thank you, Lucy, for your really comprehensive answers there, both on what you've just talked about, but also on the negative interest rate, because I think that's something that last time was flagged up and probably was a bit of an eye-opener for some people. But from my point of view, I'm very reassured and feel that you have shown us that there is a lot of significant pre-planning being going on and a great deal of strategy being put into this. And thank you for that reassurance and for, you know, your great reports and comments on the hoof today as well, because I think it reflects a really good officer that we've got working on the behalf of the council. So thank you for that.
Yes, thank you very much for that. And yes, I would agree with you've given comprehensive answers today, Lucy. So thank you for that. Any other questions? I see no hands.
No, I see no hands raised.
Thank you. Could I have a proposer and a seconder then, please? Councillor Heinrich and Councillor Mancini-Boyle.
Okay, I'll just go through the roll call again.
Yep.
Councillor Dixon.
4.
Councillor Withington.
4.
Councillor Blathwaite.
4.
Councillor Fredericks.
4.
Councillor Heinrich.
4.
Councillor Housden.
4.
Councillor Mancini-Boyle.
4.
Councillor Spagnola.
4.
And Councillor Penfold.
4.
Okay, that's unanimous.
Okay, thank you for that. Moving on then to item 12, which is the determination of council tax discounts for 2021/22. Councillor Seawood.
Thank you, Chairman. And as you know, we're legally obligated to set council tax discounts for the financial year ahead at around this time. The information is also required for the calculation of the tax base for the year, which is used in budget setting by the council, as well as the Police and Crime Commissioner and the County Council. This year, the only proposed change relates to empty properties. We now have the power to increase the levy on properties which have been empty for over 10 years or 120 months to 300% of their council tax charge. Officers recommend this is implemented for the 21/22 financial year. This will result in a small financial benefit, but will be a policy tool to encourage people to bring empty properties back into use, and I welcome that. Officers would like to maintain the discretion to offer an exemption to the levy where occupiers are in the process of renovating properties to make them usable as dwellings. That, Mr. Chairman, is my introduction. And again, these are quite technical matters, and I'm sure that if members have questions or want further details, Lucy Hume will be in a position to answer them. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you for that, Councillor Seward. Officer Hume, do you wish to add anything at this point, or are you just standing by for questions?
Yeah, nothing substantial, only that several councils have brought in this 300% charge already starting from next year. So it's not, we wouldn't be a standalone council in doing that. It is a quite widely used policy tool, but yeah, happy to answer any questions.
Okay, thank you for that. Any questions? I see no hands.
No hands raised at the moment.
Okay, if there are no questions then, are we required to note this?
You're essentially approving these or recommending these to full council for approval. So
right.
If you would like to take a formal vote.
Right, we will do that. Could I have a proposer and a seconder then, please? I've got Councillor Spagnola and Councillor Heinrich.
Okay, I'll go through the roll call again. So Councillor Dixon.
For.
Councillor Withington.
For.
Councillor Bathwaite.
For.
Councillor Fredericks.
For.
Councillor Heinrich.
For.
Councillor Housden.
For.
Councillor Mancini Boyle.
For.
Councillor Spagnola.
For.
And Councillor Penfold.
For.
And that's unanimous again.
Okay, thank you for that. Moving on then to item 13, which is the waste contract monitoring. That's pages 81 to 86. Councillor Lloyd, would you wish to present on this?
Thank you, Chair. Just briefly, I don't have a lot to add to the report that's been written. Just to say that this contract took 18 months, 2 years to put together in collaboration with two other councils, Breckland and Kings Lynn Borough Councils. It's quite innovative in its approach. It serves to not only collect the waste from public here, which is a very visible service for this council, but it does so with up to a 30% saving in carbon. It came into force in April, right in the middle of the COVID shutdown, and went through quite seamlessly, actually. I didn't get, or I'm not aware of any complaints at all regarding poor service during that transition, and we got good cooperation from Kia during that period, which was a significant factor in the seamless handover. You would already start to see new vehicles on the streets. They're painted white, bright new shiny vehicles. They've started to arrive and are actually going through into service now. That has significantly improved the reliability rate of our collections. The old fleet was very much losing, it was coming to the end of its life. So this is very timely that these new vehicles are coming through. And I think they're all going to be delivered by the end of this month, but Steve might have some updates on that. Really, I'd just like to congratulate Steve and his department for all the hard work they've done in, first of all, getting us here, seamlessly transitioning from one major contract to another that affects just about everybody in the district. And I think they've done a really good job on this, and I'd like to congratulate them. So, thank you.
Okay, thank you for that.
Happy to take questions.
Yes, thanks for that, Councillor Lloyd. Do we have Officer Hems with us today?
Hello, Chair. Yes, I am here.
Okay. Would you wish to add anything to what Councillor Lloyd has said at this point?
Thank you, Chair. Yes, just briefly. I think one of the learning points from this is that probably the start of a global the start of a pandemic in the UK is not necessarily the best of times to be mobilising a major waste contract. It has had an impact, and I think the first thing is that Serco were not able to mobilise the level of resource to us that that they anticipated doing because of travel restrictions, etc. We were quite fortunate in that we didn't get the level of anticipated sickness impact on Serco or anyone that the government were predicting at that time. So we've been able to work with Serco and redeploy resource that wasn't required during the first phase of lockdown, where obviously we didn't have the number of visitors to North Norfolk, and so cleansing services were reduced. And that has enabled us to protect those frontline services. The only service that we did actually reduce or impact really was on the access for garden waste customers or new garden waste customers to the service. So we suspended for a brief time access to that service to protect it. We didn't know two things. We didn't know at the time what level of additional customers we would get and whether Serco could deliver the new bins, etc. So we wanted to protect the services, hence the brief suspension. I'm pleased to say, since we've lifted that suspension, which we did as soon as we possibly could, that we've taken on additional 1,300 customers to that service, which is very positive. And we also made a decision fairly early in the restrictions to support our local businesses by offering them the ability to suspend their trade waste contracts. Obviously, a number of those businesses weren't able to trade. They had contracts with ourselves. So rather than cancelling those contracts and reinstating them, we suspended them. That was very well received by the business community. What it did do was launch an avalanche of requests to reinstate just before the restrictions were lifted in early July. I'm very, very grateful for the staff, for all their hard work here in sorting those. It did have a bit of an impact whilst people were requesting that to be lifted, some at very short notice, and our ability to both process that request and also for Serco to reinstate on the rounds. But I think, in general, that's been handled incredibly well. Councillor Lloyd touched on the vehicles. So we had an interim vehicle solution, which Serco provided at no cost to the council up until July. Unfortunately, one of the impacts of COVID was that the vehicle manufacturer shut down for a period of time, and that's delayed the arrival of those vehicles, which are now all the big collection freighters are now with us. There is a photograph of them in the report. At the moment, those freighters do not have the information panels, the advertising information panels on the side. I wanted them out on the streets collecting the refuse in order to make sure that our reliability issues improved. As an interim, there was since August, there has been a small cost to the authority per month of contributing to that fleet, because it's been the what Serco lovingly describe as previously enjoyed vehicles. Don't buy any of them, or until you've kicked the tires, certainly. Yeah, those previously enjoyed vehicles were struggling towards the end. They did have significant reliability issues on a daily basis, which was leading to missed non-round completion. And although Serco were working really hard to complete towards the end of that, they did bring some additional vehicles in to try and assist. So they swapped out some of the least reliable vehicles from other fleet. And then we agreed, when we were getting collections that weren't being completed the following day, to hire in some vehicles at some additional cost to ourselves. But that is now predominantly resolved. I think one of the things to bear in mind, although we agreed to that, I'm currently discussing some shared pain in terms of that cost, because it enabled Serco to firstly bring down some of their additional costs of overtime and vehicle repair, etc. But it also enabled them to avoid the financial deductions that are imposed or can be imposed by the local authority for failure to meet contract rectification standards. So all in all, I think there will be little impact on the authority cost-wise to that. I think the only other thing to say really is that the summer impact post July with additional numbers of vehicles has been challenging. We have seen additional burdens, and in general, I think it's been responded to incredibly well. Serco have put additional resource in, and we have, I think, in the general reports that I have, is that the summer season, what there was of it, was very busy and very challenging from a cleansing point of view. They've also put in additional resource for us in terms of additional cleans to public conveniences, and for those hand sanitizer stations that we put out that weren't supported by the or weren't able to be supported by the community, Serco have maintained the refilling of those for us. So I think in general, the issue, or the position for North Norfolk District Council is, although we've operated in part some of the old contract standards, we are moving forward to mobilisation of the target operating model that Serco had put in their bid. The new rounds, which is a different system of collection in terms of a zoned approach, so all of the vehicles being in one area on one day of the week, to the current collection system, was planned for the end of October. The delays to the vehicle have delayed that further, and we're now looking at the end of February for that. And there obviously will be further communications about that change in due course. But in general, they have done a very good job, and we continue to work with Serco very closely to make sure that we get the best outcomes for North Norfolk in terms of both value and service. Thank you.
Okay, thank you for that, Steve. Thank you for I think, a very frank and open and informative report. I think we can recognise that you probably had 3 very significant challenges along the way, and I know this contract has been a long while in its gestation period in terms of its preparation and reaching the point of delivery. One of those you certainly could anticipate and did anticipate in terms of the fleet and the reliance that you would have to place on some rather aging vehicles. And the other 2, you certainly, without that crystal ball that we were talking about earlier, couldn't have anticipated. And so I can't think of a more challenging time to move contractors on something which is probably the most public-facing service that the District Council offers during the lockdown of COVID. So I think I can only say from a ward member's point of view, I have no negative feedback whatsoever, which means that the service was seamless in its changeover. And I think that's really a creditable achievement. The other unforeseeable challenge was the extreme demands that you faced, a drop in demand, and then suddenly not just a switching on of the demand, but an extraordinary high level of demand, all at a time when the contract was settling in. So I think that this is a really good news story. I think it's one that certainly serves the authority well, that we took a lot of time because I know it took years to prepare and effect. And I think the approach with working with partners seems to be a good way forward. So I think that that's very creditable. There was one question that I wanted to ask myself, and I know you mentioned of this in paragraph 3.12, which is on page 84, where you talk about the use of carbon efficient vehicles. You say that officers continue to work with Serco to deploy the most carbon efficient vehicles available. Is that something which is written into the contract, or is that not the case?
Thank you for your very kind comments, Chair, and I will pass those on both to the team here and to colleagues at Serco. In terms of the carbon vehicle or the carbon efficient vehicles, we asked as part of the bid process for those bidders to come forward with options around efficiency in terms of cost and best practice and a number of other areas, including carbon efficiency.
Excuse me, Chair. Can I just interrupt? Apologies, Steve.
Yeah, no, that's fine.
I just think it's inappropriate for somebody on a live stream to be fast asleep, and it casts shame on this council. And you know, if you look around the screens, you'll know exactly who I'm talking about. I just wanted to say that because it brings the council's activities in a bad light. Thank you.
I'm sorry, Councillor Lloyd, I couldn't see what it was that you were referring to, but I assume that's been dealt with, is it?
I think we should carry on.
I was going to say, shall I carry?
I'd carry on, and I'll seek to address that issue separately, if that's okay. Thank you, Chair.
Okay.
Thank you.
So in terms of the requirement, it was broadly set out within the contract. However, bidders were then assessed against an evaluation criteria. In the case of Serco, they put in a carbon reduction plan, part of which was the provision of these vehicles that were carbon efficient and using either electric or electric hybrid where possible. One of the reasons they are not currently in place, or a number of reasons they're not currently in place, the first is that on trialling the vehicles, the fully electric vehicles within North Norfolk, there are some challenges around the current technology available in terms of range of those vehicles. And we are currently doing some work with them about where we are providing, and obviously North Norfolk is very successfully providing a number of charging stations around the district. So we are currently looking at that with Serco in terms of assessing how that actually works with the electric vehicle provision. And in terms of the hybrid electric vehicle options for some of the larger vehicles where it's not appropriate yet to have, because of the way that the technology currently is in some of those commercial vehicles, unfortunately commercial operators or vehicle providers appear to have withdrawn some of those hybrids. I suspect in preparation for the launch of a fully electric offering, we're told probably later in the year. So where we are currently is we are holding Serco in terms of what they've put in their bid, but recognising that that is an emerging picture that we have to respond to. So it's effectively, we're trying to make sure that we get the best technology in as early as possible, but recognising that sometimes it's better to wait for a short while before we actually impose something that then something better would come along shortly afterwards. So that's the slight issue over the electric vehicles. One of the manufacturers has actually withdrawn their hybrid chassis, which is a different chassis. So it's just not available to Serco, but we understand that manufacturer is also looking at introducing sometime in the early part of 2021 an electric variant. So that hence some of the delays that we have over that. But in answer to your question, yes, it is in the contract after a fashion.
Thank you very much for that, and it's a good full explanation of that, and I recognise that there are trade-offs between the available technology to do that and matters of service provision and reliability and so forth. So thank you for that. Questions, then I've got two on screen. Councillor Mancini-Boyle, followed by Councillor Housden. And do I see and Councillor Brown as well?
I see Councillor Blathwaite was first. Apologies.
Thank you. Right, Councillor Blathwaite.
Yeah, thank you very much for that, Steve. As a coastal ward member, I'm sure other coastal ward members will join me in thanking you for dealing with the huge amounts of waste produced by picnics and barbecues on our shores. You are under extreme pressure, and the fact that you reacted when I did have a problem so quickly does your department great credit. Can I just ask a question? The really brave guys and lasses on the actual rounds, what have we done to protect them from the hazards of the COVID? They've done their duty tremendously well.
Thank you for that. So in terms of COVID security, Serco introduced a number of steps which we agreed to fairly early on. So the first thing was that they staggered the round times for leaving. So effectively crews would all turn up at a given time. They'd get their vehicles provided to them. They do their vehicle checks. The drivers the drivers would do the vehicle checks. The loaders would wait, having a coffee and a catch up. So that was very quickly stopped, and effectively we staggered them, so they started earlier to slightly later. That meant that the maximum number of crews on site at any one time, I think, was 4. And then those crews were then provided with stations to stand in whilst waiting for their vehicles to be brought down to them. Serco also introduced vehicle cleansing, so the vehicles, a cleaner would be wiping out the vehicles fully once a vehicle was returned, and it would be then wiped down in the morning. Obviously, some of that stuff would be repeated if any of the vehicles were changed during the day due to this unreliability issue that they were suffering. Serco initially introduced a strict policy of bubbles within, or they did introduce a policy of bubbles within the crews, so those crews weren't swapping and around. So once you were in a crew, you were with that crew for that period of time. And they also required crews initially to wear face masks whilst in the cab. They then relaxed that for a period of time and then reintroduced it. So crews should be wearing face masks whilst in the cab only, and that applies to the loaders as well. So they have taken a significant number of steps. I mean, obviously, one of the benefits that we have for those staff is they don't have a lot of, the collection crews don't have a lot of interaction with members of the public in general, and they are wearing gloves whilst undertaking that collection. So the potential transmission routes are limited, but it tends to be within in the crew cohort that we're trying to prevent that transmission route. Does that answer your question, Councillor Blathwaite?
Indeed it does, Steve. Very good. Thank you.
Thank you for that. Councillor Mancini-Boyle.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Just a quick once to congratulate you, Steve. I don't know about anybody else, but my online shopping experience has gone right through the roof, and unfortunately, my waste is quite a lot more than it normally is. And your crews have, in my opinion, gone well beyond my expectations, to be perfectly honest. So well done on that. My question really is, the new vehicles we're having delivered, you're supplying with information panels. What type of information are you putting on these panels? Because we had a thing a while back where we thought this would be a really good way of advertising the services from the district council, COVID-related numbers, emergency numbers. Is this the type of thing you would be looking to put on the vehicles?
Councillor Lloyd, do you want to pick up the recycling reduction messages first, and then I'll come back to the remainder of the question, if that's okay with you, Councillor Lloyd?
Yeah, I'm happy to pick that up, Steve. So you're quite right, Gerard. The vehicles contain either side, there's a large area that we've left blank, which we intend to advertise on. The initial thoughts are that we're going to put recycling messages on there, waste reduction messages, put the right stuff in the right bins. Serco are going to help us with that. And also there is a lot of pre-prepared messaging with in partnership with the Norfolk Waste Partnership that we signed up to, using that. But I've got, in the new year, when I'm hoping officers become more available, because a lot of the environmental team have been put onto COVID duties, but we want to run a competition across North Norfolk schools and come up with some designs, and maybe choose 3 or 4 designs, give the schools publicity, maybe a small prize for the winning pupils, and also put innovative messages. I'm sure kids can do a much better job than ourselves. Does that answer your question? Yeah.
Thanks for that. Yeah, it does. Just to give you a bit of an insight, it costs about £1,000 to wrap a vehicle, so they're not massively expensive. But yeah, you completely. And I'm glad you're introducing schools and all this type of thing, because they are, after all, our future, and their ideas are very much appreciated. So yes, thank you very much for that.
Chair, could I just come in back further on that one, please? Okay, so thank you. So absolutely, as Councillor Lloyd has outlined, it's a real opportunity to get our messages across in terms of recycling. You know, that's a benefit to us as a council in terms of improving our rates, reducing our costs in terms of waste disposal elements that go to the materials recycling facility and the like. It also gives us a real opportunity to assist towards our climate change agenda. Councillor Mancini-Bourne, you're absolutely correct in terms of there is a cost for changing the panels. We're currently working with colleagues to just look at whether what system we use, so that we can perhaps have a system that enables us to change the message at relatively little cost, at least on some of the vehicles. And one of the offerings that came forward from Serco is that I think 2 of the vehicles that will be used for trade waste will have on them, instead of the static panels that you will be familiar in seeing, they will have LCD display panels. So those panels will enable us to put whatever message we want up, and can be changed based on geography. So so if those vehicles happen to be in a locality where we know we have some particular issues with recycling rates, etc., we can put recycling messages on. If we're looking at promoting some stuff around COVID, they can be changed during the actual round as we're going round. So I think that's quite innovative. We're waiting for those panels to arrive, along with some of the other, or the rest of the info panels. Thank you.
Okay, thank you for that. Councillor Housden.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. A couple of quick things and one pedantic point. When we've got things like TOM acronyms, could we just have them bracketed by the actual acronym that they relate to? Because it is quite frustrating when you're going through papers trying to find TOMs and APIs. That's first thing. Sorry, that's general anyway. Sorry about my being pedantic. Secondly, very quickly, Steve, it was great to see the dog bins collected because they were really overflowing, and it was a difficult time when we were in lockdown and everybody was walking their dogs and everything else. And I think, you know, everybody did a remarkable job on that. And also, if I can just extend that to some of the fly tipping that took place, which again was dealt with very quickly, and that's brilliant. Just on the report, can I just take your attention to 8.1 and 8.2. I see that the IT system isn't really up and running or working, and we've sort of got paper reports and we've got very little sort of working on the APIs. And again, that's one of those acronyms I'd like more detail on. Any chance a timescale on that, when that's going to be up and running and things are sort of properly working on the IT front?
Thank you. Yeah, apologies where I have used.
Right. Yeah, it wasn't just you, Steve. It happens in just not all.
No, I thought I'd covered most of them at various points in the report. So the APIs are the interface between different systems. They're the bit that talks to it, it allows it to talk to each other.
Yeah, okay.
One of the reasons that we are delayed in terms of some of the technology is because obviously the older vehicles didn't have the in-cab technology installed in it, which was enabling the collection of the data. Where they did, because Serco did put quite a lot of effort into temporary installs, the issue of reliability meant that a vehicle would go out with the round on it and would break down and then would be replaced by another vehicle, sometimes 2 or 3 times during the day, in extreme circumstances, which meant that data transfer didn't happen. Also, the 3 authorities decided that in order to give us a better overall picture on the single contract, that we would have a single IT system rather than 3 separate versions of a same similar IT system. And bringing the 3 authorities' requirements together has, in the same way as it took some time to develop the specification, so it benefited us all and wasn't detrimental, has taken some time to get that resolved and sorted. But we are working on it. I think we are looking at probably for next April having a full implementation, which is the go live date for the other authorities, where all of the analytics will be available. And it's really the analytical bits that are not available at the current time. I have to say that Serco locally on the depot basis, supported by their reporting team centrally, have produced me now what I would describe as adequate reporting on a daily report basis, which they send through to me each day. But that obviously will improve come April. I think, potentially there'll probably be some teething problems with it, which will mean that probably by May we will have an absolute full reporting system. And we are continuing to work with some of that, those elements that are there for that self-serve. In the meantime, North Norfolk's very good self-serve options that we have around the reporting forms, etc., are continuing to operate. All it means is that seamless transition of data between one and the others isn't happening. We need a human intervention or a step that is less appropriate than we'd like. So, for instance, if you, Councillor Hounston, you mentioned fly tipping. If you use the District Council's report it form for fly tipping, we'd like that to go straight into the white space software interface with no intervention or no double keying. What's currently happening is it generates an email that sends it off to Serco to ask them to do it, which means they put it in the system. That ability to have that interface means that we can improve the level of interaction between our Serco, ourselves, and the customer. and keep them much more appropriately updated than we currently are able to. So we are working towards it. I will keep you updated on progress on that.
Fine, Steve. Thank you very much. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. Councillor Brown, did you have a question?
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'd just like to echo the compliments to Officer Hems, to his team, and to his counterparts at Serco, and in particular to the employees on the waste collection service, who are really unsung heroes to a certain extent in the way that they've performed their duties during the very difficult period and the lockdown and the pandemic and so forth. I certainly haven't received any complaints from residents in my ward, I'm delighted to say. And I think we should recognise that the continuity of the service has really served to credit the reputation of this council. We haven't suffered in this district like some other local authorities who have had to interrupt their waste collection services during the pandemic. So I would like to say a heartfelt thank you, I think on behalf of all members of this council, to Officer Hems and his team. And I know he receives these compliments with personal modesty. And I know that he will be very appreciative of our gratitude. So well done, Steve.
Thank you for that. Do I see Councillor Mancini-Boyle?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I completely agree with what Councillor Brown has said. May I suggest that we send a letter to the teams of our refuse collection so they know that they are appreciated rather than just something on video. I think it would be nice if every single one of them received a thank you on behalf of the council in appreciation of the hard work and dedication that they've shown during this pandemic.
Yeah, thank you for that. My understanding from what Mr. Hems said earlier, he will do that, and it won't be on the basis of what we've got sort of said and seen on the screen today. Am I right in assuming that, Steve?
Chair, I'm more than happy to do that. I have previously communicated with the Serco staff in a similar vein. I'm happy to have an offline conversation, as I believe that that might be coming from members anyway. There were plans to do that, so I will take that offline and make sure that they receive the recognition that this committee has given them. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much for that. I don't see any further hands up. Are we all done on questions? Okay. Could I have a proposer and a seconder then for this, the receipt and noting of this report? Councillor Fredericks and Councillor Mancini-Boyle. Do you wish a formal vote to be taken, Matt?
It's just an update, so this is a note. So just a show of hands is absolutely fine for this.
Could I have a show of hands then, please?
Okay, yeah, that is unanimous.
Okay, thank you very much, and thank you, Steve, for the report. I think you can take away some very positive messages from this committee, and I think I know how much effort has gone in over the years, and I know that it would have caused quite a bit of stress to you and others in your team in the preparation of this. And so I think this, quite rightly, is one that you can take a great deal of credit back to the team and the contractor. And I think you can wholesomely say that this committee is very supportive of what they've done, very appreciative of what they've done, and the extraordinary effort they put in during the COVID crisis in particular. So let's hope that the contract will continue in the same way. So thank you very much for that positive experience today.
Thank you very much, Chair.
I'm mindful that we are approaching 11 o'clock. We've completed items up to item 14, our next item. I make it a couple of minutes to go. Would everybody like to take their 2-minute silence at this point? And could I just check, Matt, whether we will stop the live streaming for that?
I think we've observed minute silence with the live stream enabled before. If everyone just switch off the video feeds, or as long as everyone makes sure they're muted and that no one makes a sound, I think that's okay.
That would be very helpful if you would. So if we're agreeable then, if we could just take 2 minutes silence in quiet reflection of those who have lost their lives in the various conflicts over the years. Okay, thank you very much for that. If we're all back to together, we'll resume then on item 14, which is the Cabinet Work Programme, pages 87 through to 90. Matt, would you like to lead on this?
Yeah, of course. I'll just move to the Cabinet Work Programme. Just to note that I did mention previously that the income generation and savings briefing should be taking place not next Wednesday, but the one after, and that is in advance of the medium-term financial strategy going forward in December. So I think I would encourage all members, not the scrutiny members, to attend that briefing to try and get a handle on those possible solutions to, even though we don't now have a budget deficit this year, we may still in the future be looking at those predicted deficits. So certainly encourage people to attend on the afternoon session, and then to feed any kind of thoughts and recommendations into the medium-term financial strategy when it comes forward to the committee. Again, and I suppose I can come to performance management when we look at the scrutiny work programme, and then just looking forward to the 2021 January cabinet meeting, obviously we will be looking to have a pre-scrutiny session on the budget as takes place normally. There's also on there the communication strategy, which I think members would be very interested to see that and to potentially input into that. So I don't think it's on the overview and scrutiny work programme yet, but it's certainly something that I will look to bring across if everyone is keen to see that.
Okay, any questions, any comments in relation to what Matt has said?
Denny has just said she'd like to just comment on that if possible.
Yes, go ahead, Emma.
Thank you, Chairman. I just wanted to add a couple of points. At the moment, we don't have a cabinet scheduled in for January, so I've just I've prompted the leader just to see whether she wants to pencil that in so the budget item can go through to January, and then we will pencil in the scrutiny meeting after that. So I'll keep members informed regarding that. And also, it looks as though we will have the print room contract coming through to cabinet in December. That wasn't on the work programme, that was added last week after the agenda had gone out. So just so you're aware that that will be coming through to December cabinet too. So it's just to keep you updated on that item too. That's it, thank you.
Just
okay,
thank you for that. Who hasn't seen in the chat, Lucy's just added a comment there that she will be running some some information briefings regarding scenario plans on the MTFS. I don't know if you wanted to say anything about that, Lucy.
Yeah, just really quickly. So when we do our session on income and savings, I'll update members as to whatever the current scenario plans for the medium-term financial strategy are. So we'll be looking at the forecast deficits over the next 4 years and whatever the government has decided to tell us at that point on planned funding. What is interesting is the spending round. The one-year spending round is going to be announced that morning, so I should have hot off the press information for you for that afternoon session. So hopefully that will be useful to you. But if there's anything else that you wish me to cover, then do let me know and I'll see if I can work that in, because I want it to be as useful to you as possible.
Yes, thank you for that, Lucy. Yeah, I think the origin and the substance of this piece of work really was to give an opportunity for overview and scrutiny to understand in the first instance what proposals there are already with regard to how we can close the gap, and also to be able to have an opportunity to contribute to the discussions in a constructive and pre-scrutiny way that would be helpful to take the matter forward. So it was within that context that we were looking to be able to stage that type of event. And so anything that you can do to brief us ahead of that and prepare us for that would make best use of the time that we will give it.
Absolutely, I'll do that.
Thank you. Any other questions in relation to the Cabinet work programme? No. The scrutiny work programme then, Matt, please.
Yeah, I suppose the main thing to mention on this, certainly for next month, everyone's aware that we had the performance management, our first kind of performance management report with the new reporting system last month, and we are getting Q2 next month in December. I know that a number of members raised questions about kind of how we wanted to approach that, rather than just looking at kind of the entire report and going through it bit by bit, which I don't think is particularly the best use of time. I wonder if in advance of that we have got, we should be looking to have the session on that in advance of the meeting, so to get members up and running with the in-phase system. If we can then kind of look to identify, perhaps with emailed questions prior to the meeting, the areas that people or members want to focus on most, then that would avoid us kind of trawling through the entire report at the meeting. I don't know if there's any kind of comments in response to that. I know, Nigel Housden, that was kind of one of your concerns particularly.
Do you wish to comment, Nigel?
Sorry, yes, sorry. Yes, yeah. I mean, I think, anything that can be done sort of pre-meeting is really useful. In several areas of my work, I try and sort of cover as much as I can pre-meeting, so that once you get to a meeting, you've just got down to a core of issues. And I think that's much the best way to go forward.
Yeah, I think that's a very good point. Any other comments from any other members? No, I don't see any hands raised. Anything you wish to add then to the overview and scrutiny action plan, Matt?
Nothing on the action plan. I was just going to add that on the work programme, we are, as you can see on the work programme, we're kind of due for our next update, which I think is quarterly on the Sheringham Leisure Centre. I'm not sure. I don't know if I think gyms have closed, so I don't know if there'll be any impact of that needs reporting on the existing splash facility. And then also I expect, even though the crime disorder briefing is on for December on the work programme present, I expect it's more likely to come forward in the new year. Councillor Withington has a hand raised there.
Okay, yes, Councillor Withington.
Thank you. I just wanted to pick up a few things that are on the pending items to be confirmed list. Is that appropriate at this stage, Chair? Page 94.
Yes, by all means.
Thank you. I just looking at the some of those that we've got on there, and it links to this. In particular, I'd like to look at the monitoring the resource implications for the homeless strategy. And this sort of came up connected in a bit in the last meeting when we talked about the possibility of scrutinising the purchase of the temporary homes in North Walsham that we looked at. But I think we mentioned then that it would be useful to discuss that when we could see what the impact was of that temporary housing that we're purchasing coming in. And although, we obviously welcome the money that's just been announced from government, I think it's really important that we look and measure how effective, because I'm anecdotally, I know we're hearing that it already is coming together on the housing that we are purchasing and putting in place and what that impact is. So could we be looking to perhaps do that in perhaps May or June time?
Well, we've got that listed as a potential panel item. I think that's something that we do need to flesh out what the scope and the terms of reference of that will be. Obviously, this started off life as a resources implications with regard to the strategy. If we want to drill down into a lower level with regard to a particular housing project, then maybe that can be done as part of that. And I think that's probably a discussion to be had when we get to scoping out what the panel item should comprise of. So if you're content for us to follow that process, then we can pick that up in that way. Would you like any comments you want to add to that, Matt?
I would just say that I think, Liz, yes, certainly relevant. We have seen, a number of purchases for temporary accommodation go through Cabinet, and it probably would be helpful for members to see perhaps a cost-benefit analysis of how that has improved the situation in terms of lowering kind of rents that we might be paying or something like that. So I think, yes, it could be helpful to see in the future.
Okay. Any other items, Liz?
The other one was the sorry, finding my notes. The Market Towns Initiative. I was just wondering, because that, as I understand it, that part of that project, not the HAS part, but the Market Towns Initiative, is sort of coming towards the end of that bit. So are we looking to have a look at that and see how effective that's been, because we're getting an increasing number of grants in and for different things, and this project's an example of perhaps something that was done well, and we need to be picking out those thoughts so that we can spread that across the council, because I think that's the main emphasis of this committee, isn't it, that we learn and we put process in place that improves the way the council operates, rather than it being about just, you know, negative things that you mentioned earlier, Nigel. So that's something I'd like to see us move forward a little bit, if it is the appropriate time.
I should say, just in general principles, I think it has to be the case that wherever we have projects which attract significant sums of money in terms of funding, the council overall has a responsibility to ensure that the delivery of that is transparent, and any feedback from all of those should be fed into the process, should I say, before they are closed off and we move on from. The MTI was a specific initiative which included specific market towns. And where we are on that at the moment is that because of the lockdown, a good many of the projects that were intended to be progressed and indeed completed by now clearly haven't been able to, because they have suffered the inevitable delays for a whole range of reasons. So that's what that particular item, and I think we've got that on hold, obviously pending evidence that those towns, the participating towns and the projects have actually reached the stage where we can say, hey, that's been delivered, or no, it's not, and what has the experience been. So that is certainly what that particular item is referring to. And I think with regard to like North Walsham, where there's again another significant sum of money, there will be a separate probably exercise with regard to reporting back and reviewing the success of those kind of projects. But that they were not actually part of the original MTI, but there's no real reason why we can't actually include some of those as part of that process. So if it's efficient to do that, then I think we probably should give consideration to that. Any comments on that, Matt?
Yeah, I think as you've mentioned, really, we're just in a position where a lot of round 2 and 3, and in some cases even round 1 bids where they were looking to complete have just been so impacted by COVID-19 that we did approve, or Cabinet approved, the 6-month extension to the completion deadlines, and they're really not in a position, certainly, to use kind of Stalham, for example, where they had money to host town high street events. That's just something they can't do in the current circumstances, and we wouldn't want them to do that and risk kind of large groups of people, and I think it would be illegal anyway. So it's just a waiting game. I do note that as Councillor Shires has noted in the group chat, we do have some applicants that have fully completed their projects, such as North Walsham, who I think were fairly efficient in completing the project. And those of you that do visit North Walsham, you'll probably have seen what they were able to achieve there. I visited North Walsham recently, 1 or 2 weeks ago, and kind of walking through the precinct, and you can see that there's been a substantial improvement in the paving around that area. So yeah, I mean, in terms of bringing that kind of reporting forward, it would be my preference to wait until they're all complete, but you could, if you wanted to, you could have an update report to just as kind of a summary of monitoring reports, really, to see where each town is at in terms of project completion. It's up to you in that respect.
Okay, you content with that, Liz?
Yes.
Okay, any other observations that you had? No.
No,
Councillor
sorry, I was having problems.
All right, go ahead then. Was that the end of your observations?
Yeah, I think we've got Councillor Heinrich and Councillor.
We do. Councillor Heinrich.
Thank you, Chairman. Just looking at the scheduling for the work on Development Planning Performance Review, Spring would seem a little bit early if we're going to be fair to the officers concerned, given they're implementing this new uniform computer system at the end of this year. That really needs to be given time to settle down before we start making judgments on what's happening there. I think summer would be more appropriate.
I think with all of these, we're open to making adjustments according to the circumstances. I think we have only recently become aware of the introduction of the uniform system, and so I think what you say is a fair comment, and we'll reflect that in the timing of that report. Any other observations?
Councillor Housden, did you still want to raise a point?
Yes, if I can. And just looking at climate change strategy, declaration of climate emergency, I mean, that's a vast subject, from species decline, habitat loss, through to air quality, coastal erosion, and all that's attendant. And that's a huge subject. I just wondered how we're going to deal with that.
I think that certainly you're right. It will need some very careful scoping. I think, Steve, I see you've got your hand raised. Do you want to contribute to that?
Thank you, Chair. Well, we have interviewed now for both the Climate Change Projects Officer and the Environmental Policy Officer. We had very significant interest in those two positions, and the two successful candidates will commence their employment with us, one I think next week and one the 14th of December. So we haven't had any significant resource to take forward that work stream outside of our coastal management resources, and we will have dedicated resource in that activity now from the beginning of the new year. So I would hope that we can make very significant progress in respect of that agenda from the very beginning of next year.
Okay, good.
Okay, thank you for that. I think just coming back to your point, Councillor Hazen, there is clearly a piece of work to be done to ensure the scoping of that is appropriate, and we can schedule that in, bearing in mind that those new incumbents will take some time to settle in and to develop an agenda that they will deliver on, so the timing of that may well slip to the right. But even when it does, a point I think that you've made is that it is a huge topic, and I think we would need to be careful in what we choose to focus on, and otherwise it would be not probably a very fruitful exercise. But certainly we do have the outline of the agenda. We are, after all, a scrutiny committee, and so the thrust of our work would be to scrutinise what's already been identified as a work stream within the corporate plan and the delivery of that. So that's where I would expect our prime focus to be. Outside of that, we may have views about whether there are other things that could be done outside of the current proposals within the corporate plan, and it would then be for the administration to decide whether it wanted to embrace those or how it wanted to treat them. So that's a piece of work that could be structured in that way, and hopefully would avoid some of the more wide-ranging debates of which could run and run. So I hope that's helpful to you.
If that's fine, yes. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other observations? No? Okay. Are you content then to note both the work programmes, the Cabinet work programme and the Scrutiny work programme, and then we have an action list attached as well? Are you comfortable to, are you content to note those? Could I just have a show of hands, please? Thank you.
Yeah, that's great.
Thank you. Right, okay. So we've completed those. I'm not aware of any other business that need to take up our time today. No need for the exclusion of the press and public. So I'd like to formally close the meeting. So Matt, if you would be good enough to stop the live stream, but I would like members and officers to remain online, if you would please,